Hello, everybody. Welcome to our course, Biblical Hebrew, and our very first class. The first few are introductory classes, and the first time I want to talk about Hebrew being a Semitic language. What does that mean? There are different language families in the world. For instance, I know some of my viewers who asked me to start this course live in Africa, in Uganda. Now, look here at my map of Africa. And where do you see these colors? Those are language families. So you already know that some languages are related to each other. If you speak, let's say you speak Lugwere, then it's not so hard to learn Luganda or even maybe Kikuyu or another language that is related, right? Because related means they have things in common. So here in this map, you see groups of families that are related to each other. So for instance, the orange, those are the Bantu languages. Bantu languages are a group, a family of languages that all have something in common. But it's not the only family of languages in Africa. There are the Khoisan and there is others. You see the Niger Congo, the red color. That's another family, and these families are also connected. There's two families, the Bantus, the orange and the red, and these families are like cousins to each other. You could say that all the Bantu languages are brother languages or sister languages, the red one also with each other, but they are cousins to each other. So if you know a Bantu language, it may be easier to learn, let's say, Ibu or Yoruba or Fulani, because even though it's not a Bantu language, it's still somewhat related. It might be easier for you than learning Chinese or Spanish. So those are languages. Now you see the blue, that's very big. That's mostly Arabic, but we will come to that later. Let me show you another map to explain what I'm talking about. Here you have a map, an overview of all the language families in the world. Not all, I have to say, not all. These only look at the official languages, the main official languages of the countries. Now, for instance, here on the left, you see the United States. It's all blue because the main language is English. But there are also languages spoken by Native Americans who lived there before the white people came, and their families are not related, or their languages are not related to English. But because it's a minority language, this particular map, doesn't look at the smaller languages. It looks at the main languages. Now, you see blue. Blue is a huge family of languages. It's called the Indo-European languages. And you see, it's probably the most successful languages in terms of the languages that are the main languages in the world. So in the left continent, North and South America, the main languages there are English and Spanish and Portuguese, but they're all Indo-European languages. You see on the right here, you see this is the main language here is Russian, is an Indo-European language. Even in India, where the main language is Hindu, not the only language, there's many other languages, but Hindu is an Indo-European language. So you see Indo-European is widespread. And so we're going to look a little closer to language families. I hope you'll understand later why. All right, now here, this is a very cute image, no? This image is made and to show the languages, not so much as families, but as a tree with branches. Not all. This only talks about, or mostly about, Indo-European language. See this big tree on the left? It says on the bottom, Indo-European. That's what it's called. But they have many branches. So you go on the right branch, European. Now look all the way in the right, English. See, that's a big language within the Indo-European tree on the branch of Germanic language. Now, you see left is German, a small on the right is Dutch. That's my native language. So English, you see, this is this big branch is Germanic languages. So German, English, Dutch, and there's a small branch on the bottom Danish, Swedish, Norwegian. Those are all Germanic languages, and they're all pretty much relatively easy if you know one or two of these to learn the others. Now, to the left of that is another big branch, Romance languages. Romance languages all are related to an old language called Latin. And so, you see, Spanish is big, Portuguese is not small either, and Italian, those are related to each other. If you know Spanish, it's relatively easy to learn Portuguese or Italian. And so those are Romance languages. That's a family in itself. So you have the family of Germanic languages, family of Romance languages. In the middle, you see a branch, Slavic languages, Russian, Ukrainian, Polish. Those are all related and relatively easy to compare. And the big chunk on the left, Hindi, which is I mentioned in India. So now you see that there are families of roots, or you can say branches of languages. So where is Hebrew? Right? We're talking about Hebrew eventually. Now look here, I'm just going to go give a few examples. These are the Germanic language we talked about. Where are they spread? So these languages, the colored ones, are all related. You see, this is England here, and Ireland, the main language there is English. And that's a Germanic language, and it's somewhat related to, let's say, across the sea. Here, they call it Netherlandic. Most people call it Dutch. So that's my language. But my country has another little language, very tiny, Frisian. But then you go a little bit to the east, you see Germany. Germany is much bigger language. And to the north, you have Scandinavian languages, Denmark, Sweden, Swedish, Norway, speak Norwegian. And even here, Icelandic, and tiny language here on the Faroe Islands is, they speak Faroe. But these are very much related. If you speak Norwegian, you can just speak to somebody with, it's actually so related that Swedish and Norwegian, these two languages here, they can talk to each other, no problem. They understand each other, and Danish to a large extent too. All right, here you see how English is the most successful of the Germanic language, is spread all over the world. See, all these languages have at least English as at least one of their official languages. And it all came from England. So that was very successful. All right. Here are the Romance languages that all come from Latin. Latin was one of the, or at a certain point, the main language of the Roman Empire. And they came, and a lot of people wanted, that was a real language. Of course, they had their own language. Why didn't they just speak their own language, right? But these languages were spoken. Latin was written, and there were books in them, so that was much more important. And also became the language of the Catholic Church. That was everywhere. People became members, became Catholic, and so that in those days, all the services were done in Latin. So that was those are some of the big reasons. It's like thinking of Luguere. For most people don't read and write Luguere, they only speak it. So the real language that you speak, that you can write and read, was Luganda, and that's why it seems to be more prestigious and more important. So people started to try to learn to speak Latin, but they spoke other languages. So the Latin that they spoke was not the really fancy Latin. It was a bit like a dialect Latin, and that is how these different languages came about, were from Latin. So in Spain, they started some kind of mixture of a lot of Latin, but with some influence of their original languages. This is Spanish. Another language here is Catalonia, Catalan. Here, this is Portugal. Portuguese also comes from Latin, but with its own things. Here, all the way here in Romania, Romanian, and here French. Those are the most important, Romance languages. Now, this is a funny picture. It sees Latin as the dad who founded his whole family. Italian is actually different from the others. Italian is basically a modernized Latin, in my opinion. Okay, but these are the kids, the children that came from Latin: French, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian, and then some smaller languages, Catalan and Sardinian. All right, that's just funny, and that's how it works. Now we're going to Semitic languages, because Hebrew is a Semitic language. And now, originally, there were three big groups of Semitic languages. Like a Semitic languages, also a big family with smaller branches. Now let's first look. So you had Eastern Semitic languages and Southern Semitic languages and Central Semitic languages. That's one of the terms. Other people call it differently. And let's see. This is, where, of course, where they spoke it. Just to orient yourself, the land of Israel is here. See, this is Arabia, now called Saudi Arabia, or this is Yemen, Oman. This is Ethiopia. Now let's first look at the Eastern, briefly, of course, Eastern Semitic languages. Here, Eastern Semitic languages, you see there's a cross. That means these languages are not spoken anymore. But Akkadian, for instance, was a very important language in Babylonia. And look, this is how it was written. This is called cuneiform. It was quite hard to learn. It's not an easy system. We go now to the South Semitic languages here. South Semitic languages. Let's look and zoom in. Here they are. Now, if you look carefully, there's actually also two groups here in the south of Arabia. Here, this is Yemen. These have little crosses, meaning they're not spoken anymore. But there's some of these are still spoken. I do not think they are written. I think they're only spoken. This is in Oman. I'm not sure. There's some people must write it, but I don't know. I haven't known. But for instance, one of these extinct South Semitic languages is called Sabian. And here's an image. This is what it would look like. This was their alphabet. But in Africa, in Ethiopia, and in Eritrea, there's still Tigrinya is the main language in Eritrea. Amharic is the main language in Ethiopia. And this is what that looks like. This is Amharic. And I'm not sure, but I think Tigrinya uses the same writing system. But it all does not look anything like Hebrew, right? So now let's go to Central. We're getting closer to Hebrew, ladies and gentlemen. And you don't have to know these things, but later it will to have some kind of an idea of the families of the languages and Hebrew and Semitic languages. It will be helpful to have heard it at least. So this is an introduction. This is not something you need to know. Here, this is Central Semitic, and we're zooming in on that. Here they are. The most important one, of course, not for us, but the most successful one, of course, is Arabic. This is the most best known language. Now here you have an example of what Arabic looks like. It has developed late, but it has developed a very beautiful writing system. The letters are very beautiful, very elegant, and okay. But that is Arabic, and I'm going to show you how Arabic is spread through a large part of the world. So it is right now, in this part of history, the most successful Semitic language. Look, all this is where Arabic is spoken as at least a official language. Some countries, it's the only language. Some countries, it's one of the official languages. For instance, here, Somalia, most people speak other languages, but it is one of the official languages, and it is learned and taught in schools. And there are significant people here in Eritrea that speak it. Now look here, Sudan, it's South Sudan even. So it's a big area, right? And where it's dark green is where basically that's almost the only language that people speak. Now look at another group, Canaanite, Phoenician, and Hebrew. Those are basically very close. They were basically just dialects of the same language. Moabites spoke the same language as the Hebrews. The Ammonites, the Phoenicians, Edomites, they could just talk to each other, no problem. They had no problem. And this is what their script, their alphabet looked like. So this does not look so much like Hebrew either, or a bit more maybe. So this here is basically Old Hebrew letters. This is old, and this is a little later, but still not something. It's not the language of Hebrew that we know now, because most of you will know already, at least some Hebrew. Now, another one, Aramaic. See, that used to be a very important language. It was like English is now. That people who, if you have somebody from, let's say somebody from, I know a couple with children who live in Uganda. He's from Uganda. His language was Lugwera, but she's from Kenya, and maybe you know who I'm talking about. And her language was Kikuyu, but he doesn't speak Kikuyu, and she had a harder time with Lugwera. So together they speak English, even though English is not any of their born languages. So that English has become the international language, the second language that people speak if they don't know each other's languages. Now, that was the same with Aramaic for a long time, and even in Egypt for a very long time. It's quite far away. All over the Middle East, Aramaic was the official language that people used. Now, this is what Aramaic looked like. This already looks a bit like Hebrew, right? Looks more like Hebrew than the old Hebrew I showed you before. Now, what happened? Aramaic became such an important language that Aramaic has influenced and therefore changed to some extent Hebrew, the Hebrew language, but specifically the Hebrew writing, because the Jews adopted Aramaic, and so and of course it changed it a bit because everybody has a different handwriting. So this is Aramaic, and this is a bit later. This is now Hebrew. So they adopted the Hebrew alphabet, and the Hebrew that we're using now is really based on Aramaic and not on Old Hebrew. We'll go here, and from this evolved the alphabet that many of you will have seen and probably already know. This is, by the way, a type of Hebrew letters that's specifically used for Torah scrolls by most Torah scribes. Okay, in most Torah scrolls. Now, Aramaic also developed loose from Judaism. There's also Christian. Aramaic is still spoken, mostly by smaller Christian groups. And so there's a Christian Aramaic letters that evolved, and that looks like this. Once it looks a bit like Arabic for some people, but that's, again, quite different. All right. Now, why did I bring this up? Why did I talk about Hebrew being a Semitic language? And you will hopefully understand later. All the Semitic languages have something in common. They are based on consonants. And consonant is a certain letter. You have two sorts of letters, consonants and vowels, but that's another class. I'm going to explain what consonants are in the third class, is my plan. But soon enough. So now you know that Hebrew is a Semitic language, that it's related to Arabic, that it's related to Aramaic, and somewhat further related to languages like Amharic in Africa, but that's a little harder. The two most related languages of Hebrew are Arabic and Aramaic, and they have things in common, some of the sounds, but one thing I want you to remember, that consonants, and if you don't know what consonants are, you will learn soon. Consonants are very important for every Semitic language. And this is the end of my first introductory class. I hope you enjoyed it. And if it went too fast, feel free to look at it again. And you can also ask me questions, which I then will answer in the next class. Thank you so much for your attention. And I wish you fun with learning. Goodbye.